Chapter 1: Why You Need Emotional Detachment. Before watching the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. New audiobook videos are posted on this channel every day. There's this feeling you know too well. The constant alert. The mental vigilance that never sleeps. You're perpetually on guard, reading into every word, every pause, every facial expression. Someone says something neutral, and your mind spins a story around it. A colleague doesn't reply to your message immediately, and suddenly you're running scenarios of what you did wrong. Your partner sounds tired, and you're analyzing whether it's about you, whether you're losing them, whether something fundamental has shifted. This isn't occasional worry. This is a way of living. A background hum of anxiety that colors everything you touch. And here's what's interesting. You probably think this vigilance protects you. That if you stay alert enough, interpret enough, anticipate enough, you can control outcomes. You can prevent hurt. You can maintain relationships. You can keep everything from falling apart. But pause here for a moment. Just observe what this actually costs you. Your mind is exhausted. Your nervous system is perpetually activated. You're not present in your own life because you're too busy monitoring everyone else's internal weather. You've become a full-time emotional meteorologist, predicting storms that may never come, preparing for disasters that exist only in the simulation your mind runs constantly. The irony is brutal. In trying to control everything, you've lost control of the one thing that actually matters. Your inner state. Your peace. Your capacity to simply be. This is where we begin. Not with strategies or techniques, but with a fundamental shift in how you understand your relationship with your emotional world. Most people hear the phrase emotional detachment and immediately misunderstand it. They picture coldness, distance, someone who doesn't care, who's checked out, who's built walls so high that nothing touches them anymore. They imagine a person sitting alone, emotionally unavailable, disconnected from the richness of human experience. This couldn't be further from the truth. Real emotional detachment isn't about feeling less. It's about suffering less from what you feel. It's not about disconnection. It's about discernment. The ability to observe your emotional weather without being swept away by every storm. To feel deeply without drowning. To care without carrying the weight of everyone else's internal world on your shoulders. Think of it this way. Right now, you're like someone standing in a river, and every emotion, every external event, every other person's mood is a current trying to pull you under. You're fighting constantly to stay upright, exhausting yourself in the effort, occasionally getting swept downstream entirely. Emotional detachment is learning to stand on the riverbank. The water still flows. You can still see it, feel its spray, even step in when you choose. But you're no longer at its mercy. You're no longer drowning in currents you didn't create and can't control. This is mental freedom. And it starts with understanding why you lost it in the first place. The fundamental problem isn't that you feel too much. It's that you've become entangled. Your emotional state has become inseparable from external circumstances, from other people's behaviors, from outcomes you can't control. You've lost the boundary between what's yours and what belongs to the world around you. Let me be more specific. When someone is upset, you become upset. When someone disapproves of you, you spiral into self-doubt. When things don't go according to plan, your entire sense of stability collapses. Your emotional state is constantly hijacked by variables outside your control. This is what we call enmeshment. And it's exhausting because you're essentially trying to control reality itself. Here's the mechanism underneath this. At some point, probably early in life, you learned that your safety depended on reading the room perfectly. On anticipating others' needs. On managing their emotions so yours could feel secure. Maybe you had a parent whose mood determined the temperature of your entire household. Maybe you learned that love was conditional on performance, on being good enough, on not being too much or too little. So you developed this hypervigilance. This constant scanning. This belief that if you could just read people accurately enough, predict outcomes precisely enough, you could create safety. But here's what actually happened. You outsourced your sense of safety to things you cannot control. You made your internal stability dependent on external variables. And now you're trapped in an impossible task, trying to manage an entire world of chaos to feel okay inside. The fatigue you feel isn't just mental. It's existential. You're trying to do something that cannot be done. You're trying to control the uncontrollable. And every day, reality reminds you of this impossibility, which only makes you try harder, scan more carefully, invest more energy into the futile project of external control. This is the trap. And most people spend their entire lives in it, never realizing there's another way. Consider what happens in your relationships. You're not actually connecting with people as they are. You're connecting with your interpretation of what they might be thinking or feeling about you. You're in a relationship with your own anxiety, not with the actual human being in front of you. Someone says they're tired. Instead of simply acknowledging their tiredness, you're running an internal investigation. Are they tired of me? Did I do something? Should I give them space or will that make it worse? What does this mean for us? You've turned a simple statement of fact into a complex emotional math problem. And you're solving problems that don't exist. This creates a fascinating paradox. You think you're being emotionally sensitive and attuned. But you're actually creating distance. Because you're not responding to reality. You're responding to your fear-based interpretation of reality. The other person can feel this. They sense that you're not with them. You're somewhere else, in your head, running scenarios. This is what drives people away. Not your caring, but your constant need for reassurance. Not your love, but your inability to trust it. Not your attention, but your anxious monitoring. And here's the deeper layer. This isn't just about relationships with others. It's about your relationship with yourself. When you're constantly entangled with external variables, you never develop a stable internal center. Your sense of self becomes a reflection of how you think others see you. Your worth becomes dependent on achievements, on approval, on maintaining an image. You're never just you. You're always you in relation to something else. This is why meditation feels impossible. Why stillness is uncomfortable. Why you can't sit with yourself without reaching for your phone or finding something to do. Because when there's nothing external to define you, who are you? The absence is terrifying. So you fill it. Constantly. With activity, with relationships, with goals, with drama. Anything to avoid the void where a self should be. Emotional detachment addresses this at the root. It's not about caring less about others. It's about caring more about your own internal integrity. It's building a self that exists independent of external validation or circumstance. Think about the people you admire most. The ones with genuine presence. The ones who seem unshakable, not because they don't feel, but because they're not controlled by their feelings. They can sit with discomfort. They can disagree without defending. They can be loved or criticized without their core stability shifting. What do they have that you don't? It's not confidence. It's not that they've figured everything out. It's that they've learned to separate their internal weather from the external world's chaos. They've learned detachment. This isn't a personality trait you're born with. It's a skill. A practice. A way of relating to your experience that can be learned. And it starts with understanding 3 core patterns that keep you trapped. First, the control pattern. You believe that if you can just manage enough variables, predict enough outcomes, influence enough factors, you can create certainty. But certainty is an illusion. Life is fundamentally uncertain. Every attempt to create false certainty through control actually increases your anxiety, because you're constantly reminded that you can't actually control what matters most. Second, the approval pattern. You've made other people's opinions the arbiter of your worth. When someone approves of you, you feel good. When someone doesn't, you spiral. This makes you incredibly fragile, because your emotional state is now dependent on variables you can't control. Billions of people with billions of opinions, and you've made yourself hostage to all of them. Third, the enmeshment pattern. You've lost the boundary between your emotional experience and others. When they hurt, you hurt. When they're anxious, you're anxious. This seems like empathy, but it's not. Real empathy is understanding someone's pain while maintaining your own emotional center. Enmeshment is drowning in their pain and calling it connection. These three patterns create a prison. A mental architecture where peace is always conditional, always dependent on external factors aligning perfectly. Which they never do for long. And so you live in constant low-level suffering. Not dramatic. Not acute. Just this persistent sense that something's not quite right. That you're not quite safe. That you need to stay alert. This is what we're here to dismantle. Not through force or suppression, but through understanding and practice. The journey we're beginning isn't about becoming less human. It's about becoming more fully yourself. About reclaiming the emotional sovereignty you were born with and slowly gave away in exchange for the illusion of safety. There's a beautiful paradox waiting for you on the other side of this work. When you stop needing external circumstances to be a certain way to feel okay, you actually engage with life more fully. When you're not constantly defending against potential hurt, you can risk real intimacy. When you're not managing everyone's perception of you, you can actually show up authentically. Emotional detachment doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. Free to feel without being controlled by your feelings. Free to care without losing yourself in the caring. Free to love without needing constant reassurance that you're loved back. This is the promise. Not that life becomes easier, but that you become more capable of meeting life as it is. Not that pain disappears, but that suffering decreases dramatically. Not that you stop feeling, but that your feelings stop running your life. So ask yourself this, and sit with it honestly. What would it feel like to not need anything from this moment except what it already offers? To be so internally stable that external approval becomes interesting but not necessary? To care deeply about people while remaining fundamentally okay even if they leave? That's not detachment from life. That's full engagement with it. Without the constant undertow of anxiety. Without the exhausting project of control. Without making yourself small to fit into someone else's expectations. The work begins with seeing clearly what you've been doing. How you've been relating to your emotional world. The patterns that made sense once but now only create suffering. This chapter is about recognition. About finally understanding why you've been so tired. Why peace has felt so elusive. Why you've been fighting a war you can never win. Because you can't fix what you don't see. And most people never see this clearly. They blame themselves, or others, or circumstances. They try harder at the same failing strategies. They exhaust themselves trying to control the uncontrollable, then wonder why they're so drained. You're here because some part of you knows there's another way. That part is right. There is. And it doesn't require you to become someone else. It requires you to stop being who you think you should be and start being who you actually are underneath all the fear and performance and constant vigilance. That person is still there. Buried under layers of conditioning and coping mechanisms and survival strategies. But there. Waiting for you to remember what it feels like to simply exist without constantly justifying that existence. This is where we're headed. Not to some perfect state of Zen calm, but to a way of being that's fundamentally more sustainable. More honest. More aligned with reality as it actually is rather than how you wish it would be. The rest of this journey will give you the tools. The practices. The frameworks. But this chapter, this understanding, is the foundation. Without seeing clearly why you need emotional detachment, the techniques will just be more self-improvement tactics that you try for a while and then abandon. With this understanding, everything that follows becomes not a should but a genuine invitation. An opportunity to step out of the river and onto solid ground. To finally, after so long, take a full breath that isn't held in anticipation of the next problem. So we begin here. With honesty about what hasn't been working. With clarity about the patterns that have kept you trapped. With recognition that the exhaustion you feel isn't because you're weak or flawed. It's because you've been doing something impossible and calling it life. There's another way. And it starts right here, with this simple but profound shift in understanding. You are not your emotions. You are not your thoughts. You are not the stories your mind tells about what everything means. You are the awareness underneath all of it. The space in which it all happens. The stillness that remains regardless of what moves through it. From that place, everything changes. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But gradually, consistently, undeniably. The grip loosens. The urgency fades. The constant internal noise quiets. And what remains is something you may have forgotten existed. Peace. Not as something to achieve, but as what you are when you stop doing all the things you thought you needed to do to earn it. This is why you need emotional detachment. Not to feel less, but to suffer less. Not to care less, but to care more wisely. Not to withdraw from life, but to finally, fully engage with it from a place of strength rather than constant fear. Welcome to the beginning. Everything changes from here. Chapter 2: The Hidden Costs of Emotional Overattachment. Let's talk about what you're actually carrying. Not the obvious weight. Not the things you can name. But the invisible load that's been accumulating so gradually you don't even notice it anymore. Like how you stop hearing the hum of a refrigerator after a while, even though it's always there, always running, always consuming energy in the background. Your emotional overattachment works exactly like this. It's become so normalized, so woven into the fabric of how you experience life, that you've forgotten what it feels like to exist without it. You've adapted to exhaustion. You've made peace with the constant low-grade anxiety. You've convinced yourself that this is just what life feels like for sensitive people, for people who care, for people who are deeply attuned to the world around them. But here's what's actually happening. You're bleeding energy from 1,000 small cuts, and you've been bleeding for so long that you think paleness is your natural color. Let's start with something concrete. Something you've definitely experienced in the last week, maybe even today. You send a message to someone. A friend, a colleague, a romantic partner. It doesn't matter who. The content doesn't even matter. What matters is what happens next. You wait. And in that waiting, something activates inside you. At first, it's subtle. You check your phone. Nothing. You tell yourself it's fine, they're probably busy. You put your phone away. You try to focus on something else. But there's this small hook in your attention now, pulling at you. You check again. Still nothing. Now the stories begin. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe they saw it and forgot to respond. Maybe they're upset with you. Maybe you said something wrong in your last conversation and they're pulling away. Maybe they're talking about you to someone else right now, discussing how annoying you are, how needy, how much. Your rational mind knows this is unlikely. But your emotional system doesn't care about likelihood. It's running threat detection software that was designed for a world where social exclusion meant death, where being cast out of the tribe meant you wouldn't survive. That ancient alarm system doesn't know the difference between someone not texting back and being left to die in the wilderness. So your nervous system activates. Your heart rate increases slightly. Your breathing becomes a bit more shallow. Your attention keeps getting pulled back to your phone, to the silence, to the story your mind is writing about what this silence means. Hours pass. Maybe a whole day. And during this time, you're not really present anywhere. You're at work but not working effectively. You're with other people but not really with them. You're doing tasks but doing them on autopilot, because a significant portion of your cognitive resources is allocated to monitoring this situation, running scenarios, preparing for various outcomes. Then finally, the response comes. And it's completely mundane. Sorry, was in meetings all day. Let's talk tomorrow? That's it. All that anxiety, all that mental energy, all those stories. For nothing. The threat never existed. The catastrophe never came. But the wear and tear on your system? That was real. The hours of diminished presence? Those are gone forever. The creativity and energy you could have applied to your actual life? Wasted on phantom problems. And here's the thing that makes this truly insidious. This wasn't a one-time event. This is your pattern. This is how you move through the world. This happens multiple times a day, with different people, in different contexts, about different things. Each instance seems small. Manageable. But collectively, they're draining you dry. This is the first hidden cost. The sheer energetic expense of your hypervigilance. You're running sophisticated simulations constantly. Your mind is like a computer with 100 tabs open, each one running complex social calculations. What did they mean by that? How should I respond? Are they upset? Should I reach out or give space? Did I do something wrong? What if they're talking about me? What do they really think? This isn't thinking. This is rumination. And rumination is to thinking what quicksand is to solid ground. It looks like you're going somewhere, doing something productive, figuring things out. But you're actually just sinking. Using enormous amounts of energy to stay in exactly the same place, just deeper in the muck. The human brain uses about 20% of your body's energy despite being only 2% of your body weight. And when you're ruminating, when you're running these constant social simulations, you're maxing out your cognitive resources. You're essentially running your brain at full capacity to solve problems that either don't exist or can't be solved through thinking. No wonder you're tired. No wonder you wake up exhausted even after 8 hours of sleep. Your brain hasn't rested. It's been running marathon calculations all night, processing social threats, rehearsing conversations, preparing for confrontations that will never happen. This is what emotional overattachment costs you first. Your energy. Your vitality. The life force that should be available for creativity, for joy, for actual presence in your life. It's all being consumed by the voracious appetite of your anxiety. But it goes deeper than energy. Let's talk about the quality of your experience. The texture of your daily life. Think about the last time you were in a conversation with someone and you suddenly became aware that you hadn't heard the last 3 things they said. You were physically present, making the right facial expressions, but mentally you were somewhere else entirely. Maybe replaying something from earlier in the day. Maybe anticipating a difficult conversation coming later. Maybe analyzing their tone for hints of disapproval. This is the second cost. The erosion of presence. You're not here. You're almost never fully here. There's always some part of your attention that's elsewhere, monitoring threats, running scenarios, preparing defenses. You've become so accustomed to this divided attention that you don't even recognize it anymore. You think you're present. But you're not. You're scattered across time, across imagined scenarios, across other people's potential thoughts about you. And here's what you're missing. Life itself. Life only happens now. Not in the past you keep reviewing. Not in the future you keep rehearsing. Now. This moment. This breath. This conversation. This experience. But you're not here for it because you're too busy being somewhere else, managing something that isn't even real. There's a particular tragedy in this. You're so worried about losing connection with people that you've lost connection with the present moment, which is the only place real connection can actually happen. You're so afraid of missing something important that you're missing everything that's actually occurring right in front of you. Children understand this naturally. Watch a child completely absorbed in play. They're not thinking about what happened earlier or what might happen later. They're not monitoring anyone's approval. They're just here, fully engaged with what is. And then somewhere along the way, we learn to split our attention. We learn that the present moment isn't safe unless we're also monitoring the past and future, unless we're tracking everyone's emotional temperature, unless we're managing our image and defending against threats. We trade presence for vigilance. And we call it maturity. We call it responsibility. We call it being a good person who cares about others. But it's actually just fear. Sophisticated fear, socially acceptable fear, but fear nonetheless. And it's stealing your life from you moment by moment. The third cost is even more subtle. It's about how you experience other people. You don't actually know most of the people in your life. Not really. You know your interpretation of them. You know the stories you've constructed about who they are, what they think, how they see you. But the actual humans? The beings behind your projections? They remain largely unknown to you. Here's how this works. Someone does something, anything. Says something, looks at you a certain way, forgets to invite you to something, seems distracted when you're talking. And immediately, before you even realize it's happening, your mind creates a narrative. They're angry with you. They don't value you. They think you're boring. They're pulling away. They never really liked you anyway. These narratives feel true. They feel like accurate readings of reality. But they're almost always wrong. Not because you're stupid or bad at reading people, but because you're not actually reading people. You're reading your own fears and projecting them onto other people's behavior. Think about how often you've been absolutely certain about what someone was thinking or feeling, only to find out later that you were completely wrong. They weren't upset with you at all. They were dealing with something in their own life that had nothing to do with you. Or they were just tired. Or distracted. Or processing something completely unrelated. But you didn't know that in the moment. In the moment, you were certain. And you responded to your certainty, not to reality. You pulled away, or became defensive, or tried to fix something that wasn't broken. And in doing so, you actually created distance where none existed before. This is what emotional overattachment does to relationships. It makes them increasingly fictional. You're not relating to actual people. You're relating to your anxious interpretations of people. And those interpretations are almost always filtered through one question: what does this mean about me? Someone is quiet. What does this mean about me? Someone seems stressed. What does this mean about me? Someone makes a joke. What does this mean about me? Everything becomes about you. Not because you're narcissistic, but because your survival system has been activated, and when survival is at stake, everything becomes personally relevant. The problem is, your survival isn't actually at stake. But your nervous system doesn't know that. It's responding to social dynamics as if they were life or death situations. So you miss the actual person in front of you. You miss their humanity, their complexity, their inner world that has very little to do with you. You miss the chance to actually connect because you're too busy managing your anxiety about the connection. This creates a tragic irony. The more you need connection, the less capable you become of actually creating it. Because real connection requires presence, and you're not present. It requires seeing the other person clearly, and you can't see them through the fog of your projections. It requires vulnerability, and you're too busy defending to be vulnerable. The fourth cost is about your relationship with yourself. And this might be the most painful one to look at. When you're constantly monitoring external variables, when your sense of okayness is tied to other people's responses and life's outcomes, you never develop a stable internal foundation. You never learn to trust yourself. You never discover who you actually are when you're not performing, not managing, not trying to be whoever you think you need to be. Your sense of self becomes this flickering, unstable thing that changes based on the last interaction you had. Someone praises you, and you feel worthy. Someone criticizes you, and you feel worthless. You succeed at something, and you're confident. You fail at something, and you're devastated. There's no continuity. No solid ground. You're building your identity on quicksand, and then wondering why you feel so unstable all the time. This shows up in small ways that accumulate. You can't make decisions without extensive consultation and validation. You change your opinions based on who you're talking to. You don't know what you actually like or want because you've spent so much energy figuring out what others want from you. You can't be alone comfortably because without external reference points, you lose your sense of self entirely. This is exhausting in a different way than the mental exhaustion we talked about earlier. This is a soul exhaustion. A fundamental weariness that comes from never being able to rest in your own being. From always needing to construct yourself in relation to something external. Think about what happens when you're alone for an extended period. When there's no one to respond to, no one to impress, no external validation to seek. For many people, this is uncomfortable almost immediately. They reach for their phone, turn on the TV, call someone, plan something. Anything to avoid the discomfort of just being with themselves. Why? Because they've never developed the capacity to be their own good company. They've outsourced their sense of okayness so completely that without external input, they feel lost. Like a phone that's lost its network connection. The device still works, but it feels useless without the connection it's dependent on. This dependency is the fifth cost. And it's perhaps the most restrictive one. When your emotional stability requires certain external conditions, you become a prisoner of those conditions. You need people to respond in certain ways. You need outcomes to unfold in certain ways. You need circumstances to align in certain ways. And when they don't, which is most of the time because you can't control any of this, you suffer. This makes you incredibly fragile. Brittle. Unable to handle the normal chaos and unpredictability of life. A single text message, a single look, a single change in plans can derail your entire day. And it does. Regularly. You've probably noticed this. How a small interaction in the morning can color your entire day. How one person's mood can determine yours. How a plan falling through can trigger a cascade of negative emotions that affects everything else you do. This isn't because you're overly sensitive. It's because you've made your internal state dependent on external variables. You've created a system where your peace requires the cooperation of things you cannot control. And then you're surprised when you don't have peace. It's like trying to build a house on a boat and wondering why everything feels unstable. The instability isn't a bug. It's a feature of the foundation you've chosen. The sixth cost is about your decision-making capacity. And this affects every area of your life. When you're constantly concerned with others' reactions, opinions, and potential judgments, you can't make clean decisions. Every choice becomes complicated by layers of social calculation. What will people think? How will this look? Will this disappoint someone? Will this make me seem weak, or selfish, or irresponsible? So you make compromised decisions. Decisions that try to please everyone, which means they ultimately serve no one, including yourself. Or you avoid making decisions altogether, letting circumstances decide for you, then resenting the outcome while pretending you had no choice. Your career suffers because you can't take risks that might result in visible failure. Your relationships suffer because you can't have honest conversations that might cause temporary discomfort. Your personal growth stalls because you can't try new things that might make you look foolish or incompetent. You're trapped in a comfort zone that isn't actually comfortable. It's just familiar. And the walls of this zone are made entirely of your fear of others' judgments. Think about the last major decision you made or didn't make. How much of your deliberation was actually about what you wanted versus what others would think about what you wanted? How much energy went into anticipating reactions, managing perceptions, avoiding disapproval? This is mental energy that should be available for actually evaluating the decision on its merits. For connecting with your own values and desires. For assessing real risks versus imagined social consequences. But instead, it's consumed by this endless social calculation that has very little to do with the actual decision at hand. The seventh cost is harder to articulate but perhaps the most pervasive. It's the loss of your own internal guidance system. You were born with instincts, with intuition, with a sense of what feels right or wrong for you. Children have this. They know immediately what they like and don't like. They move toward what enlivens them and away from what doesn't. They don't question their preferences or second-guess their reactions. They just know. But emotional overattachment erodes this knowing. Because you learn that your instincts can't be trusted if they conflict with what others want or expect. You learn to override your own signals in favor of external validation. You learn that the feeling in your gut is less important than the look on someone's face. Over time, you lose access to this internal compass. You genuinely don't know what you want anymore. You don't know if you're uncomfortable because something is wrong or because you're being too sensitive. You don't know if you should speak up or if you're overreacting. You don't know what you actually feel versus what you think you should feel. This creates a kind of internal numbness. Not the numbness of feeling nothing, but the numbness of feeling everything so diffusely that you can't identify anything clearly. It's like trying to hear a specific conversation in a room full of loud noise. The signal gets lost in the static. And when you can't hear your own signal, you become dependent on others to tell you what you should think, feel, want. You become a person who lives according to consensus rather than according to your own truth. Not because you're weak, but because you've lost the ability to hear your own voice clearly enough to follow it. The eighth cost shows up in your physical body. Because emotional overattachment isn't just mental. Your body keeps the score. Constant vigilance means constant activation of your stress response. Your nervous system never fully relaxes. You're living in a state of chronic low-grade stress that your body wasn't designed to sustain indefinitely. This manifests in different ways for different people. Tension headaches, digestive issues, chronic fatigue, sleep problems, muscle tension that never fully releases. A constant feeling of being on edge that you've learned to ignore but that never actually goes away. Your body is trying to tell you something. It's sending signals that the way you're living isn't sustainable. But you override these signals, push through them, normalize them. You take some medication, drink more coffee, tell yourself everyone feels this way, it's just part of adult life. But it's not. Or it doesn't have to be. Your body's distress is a direct result of your mind's chronic activation. And that activation is fueled by emotional overattachment, by the impossible task of trying to control your internal state through external variables. The ninth cost is about time. Literal time that you'll never get back. Calculate, if you can, how many hours you spend each week ruminating, replaying conversations, imagining scenarios, checking social media to see who's engaging with you and who isn't, analyzing texts, seeking reassurance, running through explanations you might need to give, preparing for confrontations, worrying about impressions you've made. It's not just a few minutes here and there. For many people, it's hours daily. Entire evenings consumed by spinning thoughts. Entire mornings lost to anxiety about the day ahead. Entire weekends diminished by worrying about work dynamics or relationship issues or what someone meant by something they said 3 days ago. This is your life. These hours are your actual existence. And you're spending them in fictional scenarios, in phantom problems, in elaborate stories about things that mostly never happen or don't matter nearly as much as you think they do. What could you create with this time? What could you learn? What experiences could you have? What depth of presence could you bring to the people you actually care about? But instead, you're giving these hours to your anxiety. And anxiety gives you nothing back except more anxiety. It's the worst possible investment of your finite time on this planet. The 10th cost is perhaps the most existential. It's about meaning, purpose, the sense that your life matters. When you're trapped in emotional overattachment, your life becomes very small. Your concerns become very small. You're worried about what someone thinks of your Instagram post while people are creating art, building companies, raising children, contributing to their communities, engaging with ideas, pursuing growth. Not that you need to be doing those specific things. But you need to be doing something that matters to you, something that comes from a deeper place than your need for approval or your fear of rejection. Emotional overattachment keeps you in a narcissistic loop, not because you're narcissistic, but because when survival feels at stake, you can't focus on anything beyond survival. You can't engage with bigger questions or bigger purposes because all your resources are allocated to managing your social standing and emotional stability. This creates a hollow feeling. A sense that your life is passing but you're not really living it. That you're busy all the time but not doing anything meaningful. That you're constantly stressed but can't point to anything actually important that you're stressed about. This is the tragedy of emotional overattachment. It takes your one life, your one shot at existence, and reduces it to an anxiety management project. It takes your magnificent capacity for consciousness, for love, for creation, for growth, and channels it all into the narrow bandwidth of what do people think of me, and how can I feel safe? These are the costs. Not one dramatic price, but 1,000 small bleedings that leave you pale and wondering why you feel so empty despite being so busy, so connected to so many people despite feeling so alone, so vigilant about your life despite feeling like you're not really living it. And here's what makes this especially painful to see clearly. None of this is making you safer. That's the cruel irony. All this vigilance, all this monitoring, all this anxiety. It's not protecting you. It's not preventing hurt. It's not creating security. It's creating exactly what it's trying to prevent. The distance you fear, the rejection you're trying to avoid, the loss of connection you're desperately trying to prevent. Your strategies are generating the outcomes you're most afraid of. Because people can feel it. They can sense when you're not really with them, when you're too much in your head, when you need reassurance they can't endlessly provide. They can feel the pressure of your need, the weight of your anxiety, the expectation that they need to regulate your emotional state. And slowly, they pull back. Not because they don't care, but because the relationship has become about managing your anxiety rather than genuine mutual connection. They pull back because you're exhausting. Not you as a person, but you as a pattern of constant need and vigilance and emotional reactivity. So ask yourself, truly ask yourself and sit with this question: what are you getting in return for all these costs? Is your vigilance creating better relationships? Is your anxiety preventing problems? Is your constant monitoring making you happier? Is your need for control giving you any actual control? Or are you just exhausted, scattered, disconnected from yourself and others, living a smaller life than you're capable of, trading your presence and peace for the illusion of safety? This is the reckoning this chapter demands. Not to make you feel bad, but to make you see clearly. Because you can't change what you don't see. You can't let go of what you don't recognize you're holding. These costs are real. They're being paid daily. The question is whether you're ready to admit that the price is too high. That whatever you think emotional overattachment is protecting you from, it's not worth what it's costing you. There's another way. A way that doesn't require you to stop caring or become cold or disconnect from people. But a way that stops the bleeding. That reclaims your energy, your presence, your internal authority, your peace. That lets you actually live your life instead of constantly defending against imagined threats. But first, you have to see what it's costing you. You have to count the price. You have to stop normalizing your exhaustion and calling it sensitivity. Stop justifying your vigilance and calling it care. Stop defending your patterns and pretending they're working. They're not working. And somewhere inside, you already know this. That's why you're here. That's why you're listening. Because some part of you recognizes that you're paying too much for too little. That you're exhausted from carrying weight that was never yours to carry. That you're ready, finally, to put it down. This is the foundation. Seeing clearly what you've been doing and what it costs. Not with judgment, but with honesty. Not with shame, but with clarity. Not to make yourself wrong, but to make yourself free. The work of emotional detachment begins here. In this honest accounting. In this willingness to look at what you've been avoiding looking at. In this moment of recognizing that you can't keep living like this, and you don't have to. What comes next will give you the path forward. But this chapter, this scene, this honest recognition of the price you've been paying, this is what makes the path possible. This is what creates the genuine motivation to change, not because you should, but because you finally understand what continuing this way will cost you. Everything. It will cost you everything. Your energy, your presence, your relationships, your peace, your purpose, your life. You'll spend your entire existence trying to feel safe and never succeed because you're looking for safety in all the wrong places. Real safety, real peace, real freedom. It's available. But not where you've been looking. Not in controlling external variables. Not in managing everyone's perception of you. Not in constant vigilance against threats that mostly exist only in your mind. It's in a different place entirely. And we're about to explore exactly where that is and how to find it. But first, you needed to understand why you need to look. What you're leaving behind. What you're freeing yourself from. Now you know. Now you've seen it clearly. Now we can begin the real work of transformation. Chapter 3, The Science of Emotional Detachment, Why It Works So Powerfully. There's a moment that happens faster than conscious thought. Someone says something. A certain tone. A particular look. A message arrives or doesn't arrive. And before you even realize what's happening, your body has already responded. Your heart rate increases. Your breathing changes. Your muscles tense. A wave of something, anxiety or anger or hurt, moves through you. And then, only then, does your conscious mind catch up and begin constructing a story about what just happened and what it means? This sequence matters. Because most people think the story comes first. They think they interpret something, decide it's threatening or hurtful, and then feel the emotional response. But that's not how it works. The response happens first. Automatic. Immediate. Beyond conscious control. Understanding this changes everything. Your brain is an ancient instrument trying to navigate a modern world. The parts of your brain responsible for survival, for detecting threats, for keeping you alive, these parts are millions of years old. They were shaped by environments where danger was immediate and physical. Where being excluded from the tribe meant death. Where a rustle in the bushes might be a predator. Where reading social cues accurately could determine whether you ate or starved, whether you were protected or abandoned. These ancient systems are still running. Still active. Still making split-second decisions about what's safe and what's dangerous. And they haven't updated their threat detection software for the modern world. So when someone doesn't text you back, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, can't tell the difference between this and being cast out of your ancestral tribe. When someone criticizes you, your nervous system responds as if you're being physically attacked. When social dynamics shift in ways you can't control, your survival circuits activate as if your life is genuinely at stake. This is the neurobiological foundation of your emotional overreactivity. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're not too sensitive. You're a modern human carrying ancient wiring, and that wiring is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's just responding to threats that aren't actually threatening in the way your biology thinks they are. Let's look at what happens in your brain during one of these moments. Someone says something that hits a nerve. Maybe they're subtly critical. Maybe they seem distant. Maybe they don't validate something you said. In that instant, sensory information travels from your eyes and ears to your thalamus, the brain's relay station. From there, it splits into two pathways. The slow path goes to your prefrontal cortex, the rational, thinking part of your brain. This is where context happens. Where nuance lives. Where you can evaluate whether something is actually threatening or just uncomfortable. Where you can consider multiple perspectives and respond thoughtfully. But before that slow path completes, before your rational brain even knows what's happening, there's a fast path. Direct from the thalamus to the amygdala. No thinking involved. No context. No nuance. Just a simple, brutal question: is this a threat? And your amygdala, shaped by millions of years of evolution and colored by every difficult experience you've ever had, makes its determination. Often, it decides yes. Threat. And it activates your stress response instantly. Now your body is flooded with stress hormones. Cortisol and adrenaline surge through your system. Your heart pumps faster, preparing you for fight or flight. Blood flow is redirected away from your prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, toward your muscles and survival centers. Your pupils dilate. Your digestion slows. Every system in your body is now optimized for dealing with immediate physical danger. Except there is no physical danger. There's just someone's words. Or their silence. Or their expression. But your body doesn't know that. Your body is responding to what it perceives as a survival threat. This is why you can't think clearly when you're emotionally activated. It's not a personal failing. Your brain has literally reduced blood flow to the parts that do complex thinking. Your prefrontal cortex, which handles reasoning and perspective and emotional regulation, is temporarily offline. You're running on your survival brain now, and your survival brain is not subtle. It doesn't do nuance. It does react. And here's where it gets more complex. Your amygdala doesn't just respond to the present moment. It's connected to your hippocampus, the structure responsible for memory. So when something happens in the present, your brain is simultaneously scanning your past for similar experiences. This is pattern matching. It's supposed to help you learn from experience. If this type of situation was dangerous before, treat it as dangerous now. But the system can't distinguish between actual danger and emotional pain. It can't separate physical threat from social discomfort. So it pattern matches everything. Someone's tone reminds your unconscious brain of how your parents sounded when they were disappointed in you. Someone's distance triggers memories of past abandonment, even if you don't consciously remember the specific events. Someone's criticism activates the accumulated weight of every time you felt not good enough. This is why your reactions often feel disproportionate. Because you're not just responding to what's happening now. You're responding to every similar experience your nervous system has stored as threatening. You're responding to patterns, not just to present reality. This is the mechanism underneath your emotional overattachment. You're experiencing the present through the filter of your past. And that filter is specifically calibrated to detect threat and protect you from it. The problem is, this protection is creating more suffering than it prevents. When your amygdala activates, when your stress response engages, when your body mobilizes for threat, you're not just experiencing discomfort. You're reinforcing the neural pathways that made you reactive in the first place. Neurons that fire together wire together. This is one of the fundamental principles of neuroplasticity. Every time you react emotionally to a stimulus, every time you let that stimulus hijack your state, you're strengthening the pathway between that type of stimulus and that type of response. You're literally training your brain to be more reactive. Each reaction makes the next reaction more likely, more automatic, more difficult to interrupt. This is why your patterns feel so intractable. Why you can know rationally that something isn't a big deal and still feel completely overwhelmed by it. Why you can promise yourself you'll react differently next time and then find yourself doing exactly the same thing. You're not lacking willpower. You're dealing with deeply grooved neural pathways that have been reinforced thousands of times. But here's what's important. What's true in one direction is true in the other. If you can strengthen reactive pathways through repetition, you can also strengthen different pathways. You can build new neural circuitry. This is the promise of neuroplasticity, and it's the scientific foundation of why emotional detachment actually works. Detachment isn't about suppression. It's not about denying your feelings or pretending you don't care. It's about interrupting the automatic pathway between stimulus and response. It's about creating space, just a small gap, between what happens and how you react to what happens. In that gap, something extraordinary becomes possible. Choice. Right now, you're on autopilot. Something happens, your amygdala fires, your stress response activates, your emotions flood you, you react. It happens so fast you experience it as one seamless event. Stimulus equals response. No space in between. Detachment is learning to slow this down. To notice the stimulus without immediately being swept into the response. To observe what's arising without immediately identifying with it. This might sound abstract, so let's make it concrete. Someone says something critical. Right now, your automatic sequence is hear the words, feel the hurt, believe you are the hurt, react from the hurt. It's instantaneous. With detachment, the sequence changes. Hear the words. Notice the sensation arising in your body. Notice the thought forming about what this means. Notice the impulse to react. And in that noticing, there's a pause. A space. A moment where you're observing the process rather than being consumed by it. You're not suppressing anything. The sensation is still there. The thought is still there. The impulse is still there. But you're no longer identical to them. You're the awareness that contains them, not the phenomena themselves. This changes everything at a neurological level. When you can observe an emotional response without immediately acting on it, you're engaging your prefrontal cortex. You're bringing your rational, regulating brain back online. You're literally changing the blood flow in your brain, redirecting resources away from pure reactivity and toward regulation and choice. Over time, with practice, this does something remarkable. It starts to weaken the automatic pathway between stimulus and reaction. The groove gets less deep. The response becomes less automatic. Your amygdala starts to calm down because you're no longer confirming its threat assessments with your reactions. You're essentially retraining your nervous system. Teaching it that this type of stimulus doesn't actually require a survival response. That you can feel discomfort without being destroyed by it. That you can observe emotional weather without being swept away by every storm. This is the mechanism of detachment. And it works because it works with your brain's natural capacity for change, not against your biology. But let's go deeper into what's actually happening when you practice detachment. There's a part of your brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. It sits at the intersection between emotional and cognitive processing. One of its key functions is conflict monitoring. It notices when there's a mismatch between what you're experiencing and how you're responding. It's the part that creates the feeling of cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable awareness that something isn't aligned. When you practice detachment, when you observe your emotional reactions without immediately acting on them, you're activating this structure. You're creating intentional distance between experience and response, and your anterior cingulate cortex is noticing this distance, processing it, making it meaningful. Over time, this structure strengthens. Your capacity for meta-awareness, awareness of your own awareness, increases. You become better at noticing what you're doing while you're doing it. Better at catching automatic patterns before they fully activate. Better at creating the pause that makes choice possible. This is why meditation practices, which are essentially exercises in detachment, show measurable changes in brain structure. Regular practitioners show increased gray matter density in the anterior cingulate cortex, in the insula which processes bodily sensations, in areas associated with self-regulation and emotional processing. Your brain physically changes. The structures that support detachment get stronger. The pathways that enable reactivity get weaker. This isn't metaphorical. It's literal, measurable, neurological change. But there's another layer to understand. The role of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the main channel of communication between your brain and your body. It's constantly sending signals in both directions. From your body to your brain about your physiological state. From your brain to your body about how to respond to what's happening. When you're in chronic stress, when you're constantly emotionally activated, your vagus nerve adapts to this state. It becomes calibrated to high alert. Your baseline shifts. What should be an occasional emergency response becomes your new normal. This is called low vagal tone. And it creates a vicious cycle. Low vagal tone means your nervous system is primed for reactivity. It takes less to trigger your stress response. You recover more slowly when you are triggered. You have less capacity for emotional regulation, which means you experience more stress, which further lowers your vagal tone. Detachment practices interrupt this cycle. When you observe your emotional responses without immediately reacting to them, when you can be with discomfort without needing to fix it or fight it or flee from it, you're sending a signal through your vagus nerve. You're communicating to your nervous system that you're safe. That this isn't actually an emergency. That you can handle what you're experiencing. Over time, this increases your vagal tone. Your nervous system recalibrates. Your baseline shifts toward greater calm. You become less reactive not through effort or willpower, but through actual physiological change. Your body learns that it can afford to be less vigilant because you're demonstrating, through your practice, that you can handle difficulty without emergency responses. This is why detachment feels like it gives you more capacity, more resilience, more space. Because it literally does. Your nervous system has more bandwidth. Your window of tolerance for discomfort expands. What used to completely dysregulate you now registers as merely uncomfortable. The science here is pointing to something profound. You're not trying to change your emotions. You're changing your relationship to your emotions. And that relational change has measurable, physical, neurological effects. Think about what happens in your body when you're activated versus when you're detached. Activated, your sympathetic nervous system dominates. Fight or flight. Stress hormones. Rapid heartbeat. Shallow breathing. Muscle tension. Digestive shutdown. Tunnel vision, both literally in your visual field and metaphorically in your thinking. Detached, your parasympathetic nervous system can engage. Rest and digest. Stress hormones metabolize and clear. Heart rate normalizes. Breathing deepens. Muscles relax. Your body can attend to maintenance and repair. Your thinking opens up, becomes more flexible, more creative, more capable of seeing multiple perspectives. Same external situation. Completely different internal experience. And the difference isn't determined by the situation itself. It's determined by your relationship to the situation. This is the power of detachment. It returns your biology to your control. Not control in the sense of forcing or suppressing, but control in the sense of not being controlled by automatic reactivity. And here's what makes this especially powerful. The changes compound. Every time you successfully observe without reacting, you're reinforcing neural pathways that support regulation. You're increasing your vagal tone. You're training your amygdala to be less sensitive. You're strengthening your prefrontal cortex's ability to modulate emotional responses. Each instance makes the next instance easier. The practice builds on itself. What requires enormous effort at first becomes gradually more natural. Not because you've changed your personality, but because you've changed your neurology. This is why people who practice detachment consistently report feeling like they've become different people. Because in a very real sense, they have. Their brains have physically reorganized around different patterns. Their nervous systems have recalibrated to different baselines. Their automatic responses have been replaced with new ones that serve them better. But let's be clear about what detachment is not. It's not dissociation. Dissociation is a disconnection from experience, a splitting off from reality as a protection against overwhelm. Detachment is the opposite. It's a fuller connection with reality because you're not lost in your reactive interpretations of reality. It's not spiritual bypassing. Not using concepts of non-attachment to avoid dealing with genuine issues. Detachment gives you the clarity and stability to address real problems effectively, rather than reacting to them emotionally. It's not emotional numbness. You don't feel less when you're detached. You often feel more, but you're not overwhelmed by what you feel. There's space around the feeling. Room to breathe. It's not indifference. You can care deeply while remaining detached. In fact, you can care more authentically because your caring isn't mixed with neediness or fear or the compulsion to control outcomes. Detachment is a very specific cognitive and neurological state. It's the capacity to experience fully while maintaining your center. To engage completely while preserving your autonomy. To feel deeply while not being defined by your feelings. In practical terms, here's what it looks like neurologically when you're practicing detachment well. Your prefrontal cortex is active, providing top-down regulation of your emotional responses. Your amygdala is still firing because it always will when you encounter something your history has coded as significant, but the prefrontal cortex is modulating that activation, contextualizing it, preventing it from taking over your entire system. Your anterior cingulate cortex is engaged in meta-awareness, noticing the gap between what's happening and how you're responding. Your insula is processing the bodily sensations that accompany emotions without immediately translating them into actions. Your vagus nerve is communicating safety to your body. Your parasympathetic nervous system is active enough to prevent full stress response activation. Your heart rate variability, a marker of nervous system flexibility, remains high rather than narrowing into the rigid pattern of stress. This is a very different neurological state than either suppression or reactivity. Suppression looks like prefrontal cortex trying to completely shut down amygdala activity, which never works and creates enormous internal tension. Reactivity looks like amygdala dominating the entire system with no prefrontal modulation at all. Detachment is balanced activation. Emotional centers and regulatory centers both online, working together rather than against each other. And here's the beautiful part. The more you practice this state, the more available it becomes. Your brain learns to default to this balanced activation rather than to reactivity. Not because you're controlling your brain, but because your brain is adapting to the patterns you're consistently practicing. This is the science underneath the practice. This is why detachment works. Not as a philosophy or a belief system, but as a neurologically grounded method for changing your relationship with your internal experience. Feel, but don't drown. See, but don't carry. Notice, but don't identify. Witness, but don't become. These aren't just poetic phrases. They're descriptions of a specific neurological state that you can learn to access reliably. A state where your ancient survival brain and your modern conscious brain work together. Where your emotions inform you without controlling you. Where your past influences you without determining you. This is what becomes possible when you understand the mechanism. When you see that you're not trying to fight your biology but to work with it. When you recognize that your reactivity isn't a character flaw but a neurological pattern that can be changed. The wisdom traditions understood this intuitively. Thousands of years of contemplative practice essentially discovered through direct experience what neuroscience is now confirming with brain scans and physiological measurements. That there's a way of being that's both fully engaged and fundamentally unshakable. That you can participate completely in life while maintaining an inner stability that external circumstances can't disrupt. They called it different things. Equanimity. Non-attachment. The witness state. Inner stillness. But they were all describing the same neurological reality. The same possibility that exists in every human nervous system. The capacity to observe without being swept away. To feel without being controlled by feeling. To engage fully while remaining fundamentally free. This capacity isn't reserved for monks or mystics. It's your birthright. It's built into your biology. It's waiting for you to discover it, not through belief or effort, but through practice. Through consistently choosing to observe rather than react. To notice rather than identify. To create space rather than to collapse into experience. Every time you do this, even imperfectly, even for just a moment before you lose it again, you're changing your brain. You're building new pathways. You're recalibrating your nervous system. You're training yourself in a way of being that serves you infinitely better than your current patterns. This is the science of emotional detachment. Not complicated. Not mystical. Just the practical application of how your nervous system actually works. Understanding that you're not trying to change what you feel. You're changing your relationship to what you feel. And that relational change, practiced consistently, creates profound neurological transformation. The question isn't whether this works. The science is clear. The question is whether you're willing to practice it. Whether you're ready to invest the time and effort to build new neural pathways, to retrain your nervous system, to become someone who responds to life from a place of stability rather than reactivity. Because it will take practice. Your current patterns are deeply grooved. They've been reinforced thousands of times. They won't change overnight. But they will change. Measurably. Reliably. If you practice. This is what the next chapters will give you. The specific practices. The concrete techniques. The step-by-step methods for building this capacity. But first, you needed to understand why they work. What's actually happening in your brain and body when you practice detachment? Why this isn't just positive thinking or philosophical speculation but a practical, scientifically grounded path to fundamental change. Now you understand the mechanism. Now you can trust the process. Now you're ready to begin the actual practice of transforming your relationship with your emotional life. Feel. But don't drown. See. But don't carry. Witness. But don't become. This is the path. And your nervous system is ready to walk it. Chapter 4: 5 Deep Detachment Techniques You Can Actually Use. There's a difference between knowing something and being able to do it when it matters most. You've probably read 1,000 words about staying calm, about not reacting, about creating space between stimulus and response. And yet, in the moment when someone says that one thing, when the familiar sting arrives, when the old wound reopens, all that knowledge evaporates. You're back in the fire before you even realize you've stepped into it. This chapter isn't about theory. It's about the actual mechanics of separation. Not the kind that makes you cold or distant, but the kind that lets you remain present without being consumed. The kind that transforms reactivity into awareness, and awareness into choice. We're going to walk through 5 techniques. Not as abstract concepts, but as tools you can reach for when your nervous system is screaming, when your mind is building its case, when the familiar pattern is pulling you back in. These aren't meditation exercises you do on a mountaintop. They're practices for the kitchen table, the office meeting, the family dinner, the text message that makes your chest tighten. Let's begin. Technique 1: Mental distance, watching from 3 meters away. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture yourself standing exactly where you are right now. But this time, you're not inside your body. You're 3 meters away, just watching. You see yourself sitting there, or standing, or moving through space. You notice the posture, the expression, the small movements. There's no judgment in this watching. Just observation. Like you're viewing a scene in a film, and you happen to be one of the characters. This is mental distance. And it might be the most powerful tool you'll ever learn for emotional regulation. When something triggers you, a comment, a look, a tone of voice, your perspective collapses inward. You become the center of the universe. The event feels like it's happening to you, about you, against you. Your identity fuses with the moment. There's no space between the stimulus and your sense of self. But what if you could step back? Not physically, but perceptually. What if you could create a small gap between the experience and the one experiencing it? Here's what this looks like in practice. Someone criticizes your work. Instead of immediately defending, instead of the heat rising in your chest, you pause. You imagine yourself from across the room. You see a person receiving feedback. You notice their jaw tightening, their breath shortening. You watch the story forming, they don't respect me. They never did. This is about that time 3 months ago when. And in that watching, something shifts. The intensity decreases. Not because you're suppressing it, but because you've changed your vantage point. You're no longer inside the storm. You're observing the storm from a place of relative calm. Neuroscience tells us something fascinating here. When you activate the part of your brain responsible for self-observation, the medial prefrontal cortex, you automatically reduce activity in the amygdala, your emotional alarm system. The act of watching yourself creates physiological distance. Your body literally calms down because you've shifted from first-person immersion to third-person observation. But let's be honest. This isn't easy. Your brain has spent years, maybe decades, operating from the center of your own experience. First-person perspective is the default. It's how you navigate the world, how you survive, how you protect yourself. So when I say watch yourself from 3 meters away, your mind might immediately protest. But it is happening to me. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't matter. And that's the beautiful thing, you don't have to pretend. Mental distance doesn't mean emotional denial. You're not telling yourself the situation doesn't hurt or doesn't matter. You're simply changing the angle of perception. You're adding perspective without removing presence. Think of it this way. When you watch a movie and the protagonist faces a devastating loss, you feel it. You might even cry. But you don't call in sick to work the next day because a fictional character's life fell apart. There's empathy, but there's also distance. You're moved, but not destroyed. This is the space we're creating. Not detachment in the sense of not caring, but detachment in the sense of not collapsing. Try this now, with something small. Remember a recent moment of irritation. Maybe someone cut you off in traffic, or a colleague interrupted you in a meeting. Replay the scene, but this time, watch it like a film. See yourself in the car, or at the conference table. Notice what happened in your body. Where did the tension appear? What expression crossed your face? Do you feel the difference? That slight loosening, that small breath of space between you and the memory? That's the gap we're working with. And over time, with practice, that gap becomes a refuge. A place you can return to when the world feels too close, too loud, too much. Technique 2, naming the emotion, speaking it into form. There's an old idea that naming something gives you power over it. In fairy tales, knowing a demon's true name makes it lose its hold. In psychology, we've discovered this isn't just folklore. It's neurologically accurate. When you name an emotion, you change its structure in your brain. Let me explain. When you're triggered, when anger rises, when anxiety floods, when shame descends, it activates the limbic system, particularly the amygdala. This is the fast, ancient part of your brain, designed for survival. It doesn't think in words. It doesn't analyze. It just reacts. But when you put language to the emotion, when you say, even silently, I'm feeling triggered right now, or anxiety is rising in me, or there's anger here, you activate the prefrontal cortex. The thinking, regulating part of your brain comes online. And here's the key, these two systems can't fully operate at the same time. When the prefrontal cortex engages, it dampens the amygdala. This process is called affect labeling. And study after study has shown that it works. Not because naming the emotion makes it disappear, but because it shifts you from being the emotion to noticing the emotion. There's a massive difference between these two states. I am angry versus I notice anger in me. The first is fusion. You and the emotion are one. Your thoughts, your words, your actions, everything flows from that anger. You become it. The second is observation. You and the emotion are separate. It's present, it's real, but it's not the entirety of who you are. It's a weather pattern moving through, and you're the sky holding it. So how do you practice this? Start simple. Throughout your day, whenever you notice a shift in your emotional state, name it. Out loud if you can, or silently if you need to. There's frustration here. I'm noticing impatience. Sadness is present right now. Fear is rising in my chest. Notice the language. Not I am frustrated, but there's frustration here. This small grammatical shift changes everything. It creates space. It reminds you that emotions are visitors, not landlords. And here's where it gets really interesting. The more specific you can be with your naming, the more effective the technique becomes. Don't just say I feel bad. Go deeper. Is it disappointment? Resentment? Embarrassment? Grief? Each of these has a different texture, a different source, a different message. When you name with precision, you're doing two things at once. First, you're giving your brain clarity. Instead of a vague sense of unease, there's a defined experience. Your nervous system knows what it's dealing with. Second, you're building emotional vocabulary. Over time, you become fluent in your inner landscape. You stop being surprised by your reactions because you recognize their shapes, their origins, their patterns. Let's try something together. Think of a recent moment when you felt emotionally reactive. Maybe in a conversation, maybe reading a message, maybe watching something unfold that you couldn't control. Now, instead of replaying the external events, turn inward. What was happening in your body? Tightness in your chest? Heat in your face? A sinking feeling in your stomach? And if you had to put one word to the emotional state underneath all of that, what would it be? Don't rush this. Let the word come to you. It might not be the first word you think of. Keep sitting with it until you find the one that feels true. And notice, right now, as you name it, does something shift? Does the intensity change, even slightly? This is the power of naming. It doesn't erase the feeling, but it gives you a place to stand. A point of observation. And from that point, you have options. You're no longer just reacting. You're responding. Technique 3, Trigger Mapping, Knowing Your Emotional Landscape. Here's a truth most people spend their lives avoiding. You are predictable. Not in every way. Not in your creativity or your dreams or your capacity for growth. But in your reactivity? Absolutely. Your triggers follow patterns. The same kinds of situations, the same kinds of words, the same kinds of people, they light up the same pathways in your nervous system, over and over again. And most of us never map these pathways. We just keep walking into them, surprised every single time. Trigger mapping is about breaking that cycle. It's about becoming conscious of the specific inputs that activate your defensive system. Because once you know what sets you off, you can prepare. You can create strategies. You can stop being ambushed by your own reactions. Think of it like this. Imagine you're walking through a forest, and every so often, you step on a hidden trap. It snaps around your ankle, and you're stuck. Painful. Frustrating. And the next day, you walk the same path, and it happens again. And again. And again. Most people, when this happens in emotional life, blame the trap. Or blame themselves for stepping on it. But they never mark where the trap is. They never learn the exact location so they can avoid it or disarm it. Trigger mapping is marking the traps. So let's do this practically. Get a piece of paper, or open a note on your phone. We're going to make a list. At the top, write things that consistently trigger me. And then start writing. Don't filter. Don't judge. Just notice. What words, what tones, what situations make your chest tighten, your jaw clench, your mind spin? Maybe it's being interrupted. Maybe it's feeling dismissed. Maybe it's when someone questions your competence, or your intentions, or your worth. Maybe it's a certain facial expression. Maybe it's silence when you need a response. Maybe it's being told to calm down. Maybe it's feeling invisible. As you write, you'll start to notice patterns. Clusters. Themes. And underneath those themes, there's usually something deeper. A core wound. A place where your sense of safety or value or belonging was compromised, often long before the present moment. For example, let's say you notice you get intensely triggered when people don't respond to your messages promptly. On the surface, it seems like it's about respect or consideration. But when you sit with it longer, you might realize it's actually about abandonment. About the fear that if someone doesn't respond immediately, they're pulling away. And if you trace that back, maybe there's a memory of a parent who withheld attention, or a relationship that ended with silence, or a childhood of never quite knowing if you mattered. I'm not saying this to make you therapize yourself in this moment. But I am saying that triggers are rarely about what they seem to be about. They're about the past, showing up in the present, dressed in new costumes. Once you have your list, the next step is to get even more specific. For each trigger, ask yourself, what's the exact phrase, or behavior, or situation that sets this off? What does my body do in response? What story does my mind immediately tell? Who in my past does this remind me of? This level of detail is crucial. Because vague awareness doesn't help you in the moment. But if you know, with precision, that when someone says you're being too sensitive, your nervous system interprets it as your feelings don't matter, and you immediately feel shame and rage, well, now you have something to work with. Now, when you hear those words, or even sense them coming, you have a split second of recognition. Oh. This is the sensitivity trigger. I know this one. And in that recognition, there's a tiny moment of choice. A pause before the cascade. Here's the thing about triggers. They don't go away just because you've mapped them. But they lose some of their power. They stop feeling so personal, so absolute. They become patterns you recognize, rather than truths about reality. And over time, something even more interesting happens. You start to notice when you're in environments, or with people, where your triggers are constantly being activated. And you get to ask yourself a different question: is this where I want to be? Is this who I want to become in this space? Because detachment isn't just about managing your reactions. It's about choosing, consciously, where you place yourself. And who you allow to have access to your inner world. Technique 4, the 3-second pause, silence before the storm. Let me tell you about the most underrated superpower you have, the ability to wait. Not to hesitate. Not to suppress. To consciously, deliberately pause. 3 seconds. That's all it takes to change the trajectory of a conversation, a relationship, sometimes even a life. Here's what happens in the brain during those 3 seconds. When you're triggered, your amygdala sends an alarm signal. Your body floods with stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline. Your heart rate spikes. Your muscles tense. Your thinking narrows. This is the fight or flight response, and it's fast. Milliseconds fast. But here's the key. It takes about 3 seconds for the rational, regulatory part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, to catch up. 3 seconds for the thinking mind to assess the situation and decide if the alarm is warranted. Most people react within 1 second. Maybe 2. They speak, they move, they defend, they attack, all before the thinking brain has a chance to weigh in. And then they spend the next hour, or day, or year, dealing with the consequences of that 1-second decision. The 3-second pause is about giving your brain time to do its job. Time to integrate. Time to choose. But let's be clear. This isn't about being slow. It's not about looking confused or disconnected. It's about being grounded. Present. Unhurried. Think of the people you respect most. The ones who seem unshakable. When they're challenged, they don't rush to respond. They take a breath. They consider. They speak from a place of clarity, not reactivity. That's not because they're naturally calm. It's because they've trained themselves to pause. So how do you practice this? Start with low-stakes situations. Someone asks you a question. Before you answer, take a breath. Let there be a moment of silence. Notice the impulse to fill the space immediately. Notice the slight discomfort. And let it be there. In conversations that matter more, in moments when you feel the heat rising, the 3-second pause becomes even more critical. Someone says something that lands wrong. Your body tenses. Your mind starts crafting a response, maybe a defense, maybe a counterattack. And instead of speaking, you breathe. 1, 2, 3. In those 3 seconds, ask yourself one simple question. Will what I'm about to say bring me closer to who I want to be, or further away? Not, will it feel good? Not, will it win the argument? But, does this align with the person I'm becoming? Most of the time, the answer will surprise you. Because the reactive response, the one that comes in the first second, rarely aligns with your deeper values. It's protective, sure. It's understandable. But it's not intentional. It's not chosen. The 3-second pause gives you back your agency. It reminds you that just because something happens, you don't have to react. You can respond. And there's a world of difference between the two. Reactions are automatic. Responses are conscious. Reactions are about the past. Responses are about the present. Reactions are driven by fear. Responses are guided by wisdom. Now, let me address the fear that comes up here. You might be thinking, but if I pause, I'll lose the moment. I'll look weak. The other person will keep going, and I'll be left behind. And sometimes, that fear is right. Sometimes, the conversation will move on. Sometimes, your silence will be interpreted as uncertainty or submission. But here's the deeper question: what are you optimizing for? Are you optimizing for winning the immediate exchange, or for maintaining your inner equilibrium? For being right, or for being whole? Because every time you react without pausing, you reinforce a pattern. You teach your nervous system that speed is safety, that the fastest response is the best response. And over time, you become more reactive, more volatile, more at the mercy of your triggers. But every time you pause, you build a different pathway. You teach your nervous system that there's time. That you can handle the discomfort of not immediately responding. That you trust yourself to find the right words, or to say nothing at all, and still be okay. This is the essence of detachment. Not removing yourself from the situation, but removing the automaticity. Not disconnecting from your emotions, but disconnecting from the compulsion to act on them instantly. 3 seconds. That's the space where freedom lives. Technique 5, Energy Gates, choosing who enters your mind. Let me ask you something. How many people live inside your head? Not literally. But how many voices do you carry with you? How many opinions, expectations, judgments, critiques? How many of the conversations you have in a day are with people who aren't even in the room? For most of us, the answer is too many. We carry our parents, our partners, our bosses, our friends, our critics, our exes. We carry the person who hurt us 5 years ago and the person who might hurt us tomorrow. We carry entire audiences of people who probably aren't even thinking about us, but we're constantly performing for them in our minds. And all of this takes energy. Enormous amounts of energy. Mental, emotional, physical. Every voice you carry requires bandwidth. Every imagined judgment pulls your attention away from what's actually in front of you. This final technique is about reclaiming that energy. It's about recognizing that your mind is not a public square. It's sacred space. And you get to decide who has access. I call this managing your energy gates. Think of your mind as a house. A house with doors. Most people leave all the doors wide open, all the time. Anyone can walk in. Any opinion, any criticism, any projection. And then they wonder why they feel so drained, so invaded, so unable to hear their own voice. Energy gates are about closing some of those doors. Not because you're being defensive or closed off, but because you're being intentional. You're recognizing that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. And that's not cruelty. That's self-preservation. So let's get practical. Who currently has a gate into your mind? Who do you think about, worry about, defend yourself to, even when they're not around? Write down a few names. And for each one, ask yourself, did I consciously give this person access, or did they just walk in and never leave? Because here's the thing. Some people earn their place in your inner circle. They show up with respect, with care, with good faith. They challenge you in ways that help you grow. They see you, truly see you, and their presence in your mind is a gift. But others? They're there because of guilt, or fear, or unfinished business. They're there because you're still trying to prove something, or fix something, or finally be seen by them in the way you needed years ago. And those people? They're not serving you. They're draining you. So here's the practice. For each person you've identified, imagine their gate. See it in your mind. A door, a threshold, an entry point into your inner world. And then ask yourself, do I want this gate open, or do I want to close it? If the answer is close, then close it. Not with anger. Not with resentment. But with clarity. With the simple recognition that this person doesn't get to occupy your mental space anymore. And here's what's wild. When you close a gate in your mind, the relationship often doesn't change externally. You still see the person. You still interact. But internally, there's a shift. Their words don't land the same way. Their moods don't dictate yours. Their approval or disapproval becomes less relevant, because they're no longer living inside you. This is what detachment actually looks like. It's not about cutting people out of your life, though sometimes that's necessary. It's about cutting them out of your mind. About reclaiming the mental and emotional real estate they've been occupying without permission. Now, let's talk about the other side. Who do you want to consciously let in? Who deserves access to your inner world? Because energy gates aren't just about closing. They're also about opening, intentionally. About choosing who you want to carry with you. Whose voice you want to hear when you're making decisions. Whose values you want to align with. Whose love you want to feel, even when you're alone. Make a different list. People who nourish you. Who see you clearly and love you anyway. Who challenge you without diminishing you. Who celebrate your growth without needing you to stay small. For these people, imagine opening the gate wide. Inviting their presence. Letting their energy in, not as an invasion, but as a gift. As a reminder of who you are and who you're becoming. And notice, as you do this, as you consciously close some gates and open others, how different your mind feels. Quieter. Lighter. More yours. This is the final layer of detachment. It's not just about managing your reactions in the moment. It's about curating the entire landscape of your inner life. About being sovereign over your own mental and emotional space. Because at the end of the day, you can't control what happens in the world. You can't control what people say or do. But you can control who you let into your mind. And that control, that choice, it changes everything. Bringing it all together. So here we are. 5 techniques. 5 doorways into a different way of being. Mental distance. Naming your emotions. Mapping your triggers. Pausing before you react. Choosing who enters your mind. None of these are easy. None of them happen overnight. But they're possible. And they're yours. The question now isn't whether you understand them. It's whether you'll use them. Whether you'll reach for these tools the next time the old pattern starts to pull you in. The next time someone says that thing, or does that thing, or becomes that thing that usually unravels you. Because here's the truth, you will be triggered again. Life will see to that. The people you love will disappoint you. The people you work with will frustrate you. The world will be chaotic and unfair and relentlessly challenging. But you don't have to be a passenger in your own reactivity anymore. You don't have to be swept away every time the current gets strong. You have options now. You have practices. You have the ability to pause, to observe, to choose. And every time you use one of these techniques, even imperfectly, you're rewiring something deep. You're teaching your nervous system a new possibility. You're proving to yourself that you're not at the mercy of every emotional wave that comes your way. This is the path of detachment. Not as coldness, but as clarity. Not as distance, but as presence. Not as escape, but as sovereignty. And the beautiful thing? The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. The pause that once felt impossible starts to feel instinctive. The distance that once seemed like effort becomes effortless. The gates that once stood wide open now close gently, automatically, protecting the sacred space of your mind. You become someone who can be in the fire without being consumed by it. Someone who can feel deeply without being destroyed. Someone who can care without being controlled. That's the promise of this work. Not that you'll never be triggered, but that you'll never be trapped. So take these 5 techniques. Try them. Fail at them. Try again. Let them become part of your daily practice, your moment-to-moment awareness, your way of moving through the world. And watch what happens. Watch how your relationships shift when you stop reacting from old wounds. Watch how your mind quiets when you close the unnecessary gates. Watch how your life expands when you're no longer collapsing into every emotional storm. This is your work now. And it's some of the most important work you'll ever do. Because the world needs people who can stay grounded when everything is shaking. Who can respond with wisdom when everyone else is reacting with fear? Who can hold space for complexity without needing to control it? That person can be you. And maybe, in some quiet way, it already is. Chapter 5, True Inner Peace. You don't gain it by losing, but by letting go of the excess. There's a misunderstanding about peace that most people carry their entire lives. They think peace is something you find. Something you arrive at. A destination at the end of a long journey, where finally, after enough work, enough healing, enough letting go, you reach this place where nothing bothers you anymore. Where you're untouchable. Unshakable. Complete. And because they're searching for this mythical place, they never find it. Because it doesn't exist. Peace isn't a place you reach. It's not a state you achieve and then maintain forever. It's not the absence of challenges, or pain, or difficulty. It's not about becoming someone who doesn't feel, doesn't care, doesn't struggle. Peace is something else entirely. Something quieter. Something closer than you think. Let me tell you what it actually is. Peace is the moment you stop carrying what isn't yours to carry. It's the breath you take when you realize you don't have to hold the weight of every conversation, every opinion, every expectation, every possibility of what could go wrong. Peace is the space between stimulus and response. The 3 seconds we talked about. The pause where you remember you have a choice. Peace is not needing the world to change in order for you to be okay. It's not resignation. It's not passivity. It's the deep, bone-level understanding that your well-being doesn't depend on controlling outcomes, managing other people's emotions, or defending your worth to anyone who questions it. Peace is internal sovereignty. It's the moment you become the author of your own emotional experience, rather than letting the world write your story for you. And here's the paradox: peace doesn't make you weaker. It makes you stronger. Because when you're not constantly defending, reacting, proving, protecting, you have all that energy available for something else. For creating. For connecting. For becoming. This chapter is about what comes next. About how you take everything we've explored, detachment, boundaries, trigger mapping, conscious pauses, and turn it into a way of living. Not as a set of techniques you deploy when things get hard, but as a baseline. A foundation. A new normal. This is about what your life looks like when you stop fighting for peace and start living from it. The myth of emotional detachment as coldness. Let's clear something up right now. Because this confusion stops so many people from doing the work. Emotional detachment is not about becoming cold. It's not about shutting down, numbing out, or pretending you don't care. It's not about building walls so thick that nothing can touch you. That's not detachment. That's dissociation. And there's a massive difference. Dissociation is a trauma response. It's what happens when your nervous system decides that feeling is too dangerous, so it shuts the whole operation down. You go through life, but you're not really there. You interact, but you're not really connected. You exist, but you're not really alive. Detachment, the kind we're talking about, is the opposite. It's not about feeling less. It's about feeling more, but without being destroyed by it. Think of it like this. Imagine you're standing by the ocean. The waves come in, powerful and relentless. If you fight them, if you try to stop them, you'll get knocked over. If you turn your back and pretend they're not there, you'll still get knocked over. But if you stand with your feet planted, feeling the water move around you, aware of its power but not overwhelmed by it, you stay upright. You stay present. That's detachment. You feel the wave. You respect its force. But you don't let it pull you under. And here's what happens when you practice this kind of detachment: you become more capable of love, not less. Because love without detachment is anxiety. It's enmeshment. It's needing the other person to be a certain way in order for you to feel okay. But love with detachment? That's freedom. It's the ability to care deeply while still allowing the other person to be fully themselves. It's wanting the best for them, not because it serves you, but because you genuinely see them. And when they disappoint you, when they fail, when they change in ways you didn't expect, you don't collapse. You don't take it personally. You don't make their journey about your pain. You stay present. You stay open. But you don't lose yourself. This is the strength people mistake for coldness. Because in a world where most people are drowning in their own reactivity, someone who remains calm looks detached. Someone who doesn't engage in every argument looks indifferent. Someone who sets boundaries looks selfish. But the truth is, they're not any of those things. They're just not willing to be pulled into the storm anymore. They've learned to be the lighthouse instead of another ship getting tossed around. And if you're worried that becoming this person will make you less compassionate, less connected, less human, let me tell you something. The people who are most present, most loving, most genuinely supportive? They're the ones who've learned this skill. They're the ones who can sit with you in your pain without trying to fix it, without making it about them, without needing you to feel better so they can feel better. That's not coldness. That's mastery. And it's available to you. What you're actually letting go of. Here's where it gets interesting. Because when we talk about letting go, most people think it means losing something valuable. Letting go of relationships. Letting go of dreams. Letting go of parts of yourself. And sometimes, yes, that's part of it. Sometimes you do have to release relationships that are draining you. Sometimes you do have to grieve the version of yourself you thought you'd become. But that's not the primary work. The primary work is letting go of the excess. The weight you've been carrying that was never yours to begin with. So what is this excess? What are you actually releasing? First, you're letting go of other people's emotions as your responsibility. You're releasing the belief that when someone is upset, it's your job to fix it. When someone is disappointed, it's your job to make it better. When someone is angry, it's your job to absorb it. This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you recognize that their emotional experience belongs to them. You can be present. You can be supportive. But you can't, and shouldn't try to, carry it for them. Think about how much energy you've spent trying to manage other people's feelings. Trying to keep everyone comfortable, everyone happy, everyone calm. And think about how little it's worked. Because you can't control how other people feel. You never could. And the moment you stop trying, a massive weight lifts. Because suddenly, you're only responsible for one person's emotional experience, your own. And that's hard enough. Second, you're letting go of the need to be understood by everyone. This is a big one. So many people exhaust themselves trying to explain their intentions, their choices, their boundaries to people who have no interest in understanding. And here's the truth: some people will never get you. They'll misinterpret your motives. They'll judge your decisions. They'll tell stories about you that bear no resemblance to who you actually are. And you know what? That's okay. Because their understanding is not a prerequisite for your peace. You don't need everyone to see you clearly. You don't need everyone to approve. You just need to know yourself and move from that knowing. When you let go of the need to be understood, you stop defending yourself to people who aren't listening. You stop over-explaining. You stop performing your goodness, your worth, your intentions. You just live them. And the people who are meant to see you will. The rest? They're not your concern. Third, you're letting go of the future you can't control. The anxiety, the planning, the mental rehearsals of every possible outcome, all of it is an attempt to control what hasn't happened yet. And it's exhausting. What if this goes wrong? What if they reject me? What if I fail? What if I succeed and it changes everything? What if? And underneath all of that is the belief that if you just think about it enough, worry about it enough, prepare for every scenario, you'll be safe. You'll be protected. You'll avoid pain. But you won't. Because life is unpredictable. And pain is unavoidable. And no amount of mental rehearsal will change that. So you let it go. Not the planning is useful. But the obsessive need to know, to control, to guarantee the outcome. You do what you can, and then you release your grip on the rest. And finally, you're letting go of the past as a life sentence. The idea that because something happened to you, you're defined by it forever. That because you were hurt, you'll always be wounded. That because you failed, you're a failure. This is maybe the heaviest weight of all. Because the past, when we're not conscious, becomes the lens through which we see everything. Every new relationship is filtered through old betrayals. Every new opportunity is filtered through old failures. Every new possibility is met with old fears. And you stay stuck. Not because you can't move forward, but because you're carrying so much backward. Letting go of this doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means recognizing that what happened to you is not the same as who you are. It's something you experienced. It's something that shaped you. But it's not your identity. And when you release that grip, when you stop letting the past dictate the present, you become available for something new. For growth. For change. For the person you're becoming, instead of the person you've been. The lightness that comes after. So what does life feel like when you've let go of the excess? When you've stopped carrying what isn't yours? It feels lighter. Not in a superficial way. Not like everything is easy now. But lighter in the sense that you're no longer weighed down by invisible burdens. You walk into conversations without the need to control the outcome. You can be present, listen, contribute, and if it goes a direction you didn't expect, you're okay. You don't take it personally. You don't spiral into stories about what it means. You receive criticism without crumbling. Because you've separated your worth from other people's opinions. You can consider if the feedback is useful, and if it is, you integrate it. If it's not, you let it pass. Either way, you're still whole. You face uncertainty without panic. Because you've trained yourself to tolerate not knowing. To sit in the discomfort of the unknown without needing to fill it with worst-case scenarios or false certainties. You show up for the people you love without losing yourself in them. You care deeply, but you don't enmesh. You support, but you don't rescue. You're present, but you're not responsible for their happiness. And here's the most profound shift: you start to enjoy your own company. Because your mind is no longer a battlefield. It's not filled with the voices of everyone you're trying to please, everyone you're trying to prove wrong, everyone you're defending yourself to. It's quieter, clearer, more yours. You think your own thoughts. You feel your own feelings. You make your own choices. Not in reaction to anyone else, but in alignment with who you actually are. This is the promise of this work. Not that you'll never be triggered. Not that you'll never feel pain or confusion or doubt. But that you'll have a ground to stand on. A center that holds, even when everything around you is shifting. And from that center, you can build a life that's actually yours. Not the life you think you're supposed to want. Not the life that would make other people happy. But the one that feels true, all the way down. How to move forward from here. So where do you go from here? How do you take everything we've explored and turn it into a daily practice, a way of being, a new baseline? First, start small. Don't try to detach from everything at once. Don't try to set boundaries with everyone, map every trigger, pause before every response. That's a recipe for overwhelm. Instead, pick one area of your life where reactivity costs you the most. Maybe it's a specific relationship. Maybe it's work. Maybe it's social media. Maybe it's the voice in your head that tells you you're not enough. And just focus there. Use the techniques we've covered. Practice mental distance. Name what you're feeling. Map the specific triggers. Pause before you react. Close the energy gates that need closing. Do this for a week. Notice what changes. Notice what gets easier and what's still hard. Adjust. Keep going. And as that area of your life becomes less reactive, less draining, you'll have more energy for the next one. This work builds on itself. Every small shift creates space for a bigger one. Second, be patient with yourself. You're rewiring patterns that have been in place for years, maybe decades. Your nervous system has been trained to respond a certain way, and it's not going to change overnight just because you've decided it should. There will be days when you react before you pause. Days when you take things personally. Days when you let someone into your mind who doesn't belong there. That's not failure. That's just being human. The practice isn't about perfection. It's about awareness. Every time you notice, oh, I'm doing the thing again, that's growth. Because you can't change what you're not aware of. So be gentle. Be curious. And keep showing up. Third, find your anchors. These are the practices, the people, the environments that remind you of who you're becoming. Maybe it's a daily meditation. Maybe it's a walk in nature. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's a conversation with someone who sees you clearly. Whatever it is, make it non-negotiable. Because the world will constantly pull you back into reactivity. It's not doing it on purpose. It's just the nature of things. And without anchors, you'll drift. But when you have practices that ground you, that bring you back to center, you can engage with the chaos without being consumed by it. You can be in the world without being of it. Fourth, remember that detachment is not the absence of care. It's the presence of clarity. The more detached you become from your reactivity, the more available you are for genuine connection. Because when you're not defending, not proving, not protecting, you can actually listen. You can see people as they are, not as threats or validators. You can love without needing them to complete you. You can contribute without needing recognition. This is the life that becomes possible. Not a life without difficulty, but a life where difficulty doesn't define you. Where you can be touched by the world without being destroyed by it. The truth about inner peace. Let me tell you the truth about inner peace. The truth no one wants to hear, but everyone needs to understand. Inner peace is not the absence of storms. It's not the absence of pain, or loss, or uncertainty. It's not a permanent state of bliss where nothing ever bothers you again. Inner peace is the ability to be in the storm and not become the storm. It's the capacity to feel pain without being destroyed by it. To face loss without losing yourself. To sit with uncertainty without needing to control it. It's the deep, unshakable knowing that no matter what happens, you'll be okay. Not because nothing bad will ever happen, but because you've learned how to meet whatever comes without collapsing. And here's the beautiful thing: peace isn't something you have to search for. It's not hidden in some remote corner of the world, or buried in some ancient text, or locked behind years of therapy. It's right here. Right now. In this moment. In the space between your thoughts. In the pause before your next breath. In the awareness that you're not your emotions, not your triggers, not your past, not your fears. You're the one observing all of it. The one holding it. The one choosing, in each moment, how to respond. That's peace. Not as a destination, but as a practice. Not as something you achieve, but as something you return to, again and again, every time you get pulled away. And the more you practice, the easier it becomes. Not because the world changes, but because you do. You become someone who can hold complexity without needing to resolve it. Someone who can love without needing to control. Someone who can be fully alive without being at the mercy of every wave. This is what's possible. Not someday. Not when everything is perfect. But now. In this life. In this body. With all your imperfections and all your wounds and all your unfinished business. You don't have to be healed to be at peace. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to stop fighting. Stop resisting. Stop trying to be someone other than who you are in this moment. Because peace doesn't come from becoming. It comes from accepting. From allowing. From releasing the need for things to be different than they are. And paradoxically, when you stop fighting for peace, when you stop making it a goal to achieve, that's when it arrives. Not as a dramatic shift, but as a quiet settling. A softening. A coming home. The final word: you don't have to take the world inside you. Here's the sentence that changes everything. The one you need to write down, tattoo on your mind, return to every time you feel yourself slipping back into old patterns. Inner peace doesn't come from escaping the world. It comes from understanding that you don't have to take the world inside you. You don't have to internalize every criticism. You don't have to carry every expectation. You don't have to absorb every emotion directed at you. You don't have to make everyone else's problems your own. The world is the world. It's chaotic, unpredictable, sometimes beautiful, sometimes devastating. And you can be in it, fully present and engaged, without letting it colonize your inner space. You can care without carrying. You can be compassionate without being consumed. You can be affected without being destroyed. This is the freedom emotional detachment offers. Not the freedom to stop feeling, but the freedom to feel without drowning. The freedom to love without losing yourself. The freedom to be in the fire without being burned. And once you taste this freedom, once you experience what it's like to move through the world without constantly defending, reacting, proving, protecting, you'll never want to go back. Because this is what it means to be truly alive. Not reactive, but responsive. Not closed off, but boundaried. Not numb, but grounded. Not distant, but sovereign. This is the person you're becoming. Someone who can hold space for complexity. Someone who can stay present in discomfort. Someone who can weather the storms of life without becoming one. And the world needs this person. Desperately. Because most people are still stuck in the cycle of reactivity, perpetuating the same patterns, passing the same wounds down to the next generation. But you? You're breaking the cycle. With every pause, every boundary, every moment of conscious detachment, you're proving that there's another way. A way to be strong without being hard. To be open without being vulnerable. To be engaged without being entangled. This is your work now. Not to fix everyone else, not to save the world, not to prove your worth. But to live from your center. To protect your peace. To move through life with clarity, intention, and grace. And when you do this, when you truly embody this, you don't just change your own life. You change the lives of everyone around you. Because peace is contagious. Groundedness is magnetic. And the people who are still drowning will look to you and think, how are they doing that? How are they staying calm in the storm? And maybe, just maybe, they'll start asking questions. They'll start paying attention. They'll start doing the work themselves. But that's not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is to keep coming back to your own center. To keep practicing. To keep choosing awareness over reactivity, clarity over chaos, peace over performance. Do this, and everything changes. Not overnight. Not all at once. But slowly, steadily, inevitably. You become lighter. Freer. More yourself. You stop living in reaction to the world and start living from your truth. You stop taking everything personally and start seeing things clearly. You stop fighting for peace and start living from it. And that, my friend, is everything. That's the life you're walking toward. The life that's waiting for you on the other side of all this noise, all this reactivity, all this unnecessary weight. A life where you're no longer at the mercy of every trigger, every opinion, every shift in the emotional weather around you. A life where you're grounded in who you are, clear on what matters, and free to move through the world without being consumed by it. That life is not far away. It's not reserved for the enlightened, the healed, the special few who have it all figured out. It's here. It's available. It's yours. All you have to do is stop carrying what isn't yours to carry. And start living from the peace that's been inside you all along. This is where the journey leads. Not to some distant destination, but back to yourself. To the you that was there before the world told you who to be. Before the wounds. Before the fear. Before the reactivity. That person is still here. Waiting. Watching. Ready. And the moment you stop fighting, stop proving, stop defending, that's the moment you meet them again. That's the moment you come home. And from that home, that center, that place of deep, unshakable peace, you can do anything. You can love fully. You can create freely. You can fail without falling apart. You can succeed without losing yourself. You can be in the world, truly present, truly alive, without being destroyed by it. This is the promise. This is the path. This is what's possible when you learn to let go of the excess and live from your center. So go. Practice. Stumble. Return. Practice again. And know that with every small step, every conscious pause, every boundary set, every gate closed, you're not losing anything. You're gaining everything. You're gaining yourself. And that, more than anything else, is worth the work.